Strictly Professional. Chapter 1. Come Again. The conference room, which moments earlier had buzzed with casual conversation as executives settled in, fell completely quiet. Brock fixed his gaze on Jenny Gay, who looked more combative than apologetic. What do you mean Andrew Veter isn't calling in? Jenny, a temporary hire brought on specifically to manage these kinds of logistics, lifted her shoulders carelessly. He's not dialing in. Is that a problem? Yes. Brock kept his voice flat. He's the entire reason this meeting exists. Without him, there's nothing for any of us to actually discuss. For the first time, Jenny looked genuinely rattled. Oh, I didn't realize. I know. It took considerable effort not to raise his voice, though truth be told, he couldn't really blame her. She'd been thrown into the deep end without a proper title, appropriate pay, or any real orientation. Someone with the right drive might have turned a temp gig like this into something permanent. Jenny, it was obvious, had no such ambitions. He turned to address the assembled executives. My apologies for pulling you all in for nothing. I'll schedule another meeting once I've confirmed a date with Veter directly. The room loosened, people rising and gathering their belongings, coffee cups, and half-eaten donuts. Jenny had at least handled those three things competently, and the agenda too, though that very agenda had Edward Veter meeting printed across the top in plain sight. One might have thought she'd connect the dots. Brock swallowed a sigh and turned back to Jenny, who had resumed her arms-folded posture beside him. We need to have a word. 30 tense minutes later, Jenny walked out the front door with a generous severance to cover the remainder of her contract. Days she wouldn't be working. Brock hadn't built his fortune by trampling over people. Treat them well and they tend to return the favor. That was a principle he'd learned early and lived by. Once she was gone, he retreated to his office, rolled the tension out of his shoulders, and reflected on one parting suggestion she'd actually gotten right. Get a personal assistant. Someone young and moldable, someone he could shape to fit the way he operated, scheduling, filing, fetching coffee, all of it. But who? He dropped into his chair, nudging aside the ever-multiplying drifts of paperwork. Bitcoin was the wildfire of the moment, and that was both a gift and a headache. Every ambitious young person wanted a piece of it, yet almost none of them understood how it actually functioned. It was the perfect collision of a revolutionary concept and an endless string of complications. For a while, Brock had managed to keep every ball in the air on his own. But with demand suddenly exploding, the whole juggling act was on the verge of collapse. He needed an extra pair of hands, and fast. Irritated, he yanked his laptop open and pulled up the city's most popular job listing site. It wasn't his usual method of finding talent, but there was no luxury of time for drawn-out hiring processes. He needed someone as of yesterday. Erica, it's obvious. Megan gestured toward the In-N-Out on the corner, the one they both frequented far too often. Now she was suggesting Erica put on one of their uniforms. Stop. I am not working fast food. I didn't rack up thousands in student debt to hand out fries. Megan crossed her arms. You have thousands in student debt. Handing out fries at least comes with a paycheck. The words landed harder than Erica wanted to admit, but she pushed them aside. If flipping burgers is my strategy for paying off my loans, I'll be in the ground before I'm debt-free. Megan shot her a look that blended disapproval with exhaustion. They'd been close friends for years, had graduated together just recently, and this stretch had seen more friction between them than all those years combined. Megan believed they should both grab whatever work was available and start generating income. Erica was convinced that being in Chicago put her close enough to opportunity. Real opportunity in her field, that settling for something meaningless would be a waste. She wasn't about to compromise her goal of becoming a working accountant. The problem was that stubbornness had her sleeping on Megan's sofa for the past several months. She'd been contributing to the rent as best she could, but the apartment was too small for the tension that had begun building between them. If something didn't change soon, Erica suspected the friendship might not survive it. She turned back to the laptop and scrolled further down the Monster.com listings. Then something caught her eye. Hold on. Look at this. She pointed at the screen and Megan leaned over, settling cross-legged onto the couch with her mug cradled in both hands. What is it? Administrative role. Not accounting, but I'd take office work over a drive-through window any day. She squinted at the company name. I haven't heard of them, though. Future Enterprises. Megan's expression shifted from puzzlement to recognition. Wait, I know that name. That's Brock Gordon's company. He started some kind of Bitcoin banking operation. Apply. She tapped the screen for emphasis. Despite the flicker of excitement, Erica hesitated. Her stubbornness cut both ways. I don't know. Erica. Megan's groan was theatrical. It's a major financial firm. Think of it as a launch pad. And you'd be working directly for one of the wealthiest people in Chicago. Possibly on the planet. A billionaire. Think about what the bonuses alone might look like. She nudged her with an elbow. It's not exactly what I studied for, Erica began, but Megan was already standing. Apply. It's not a restaurant, the money will be real, and who knows what other doors it opens. Ones you'd actually want to walk through. But none of that matters if you don't hit submit. She stood with her usual uncanny ability to keep her coffee perfectly level. I'm jumping in the shower. When I come out, I want to hear that you applied. Yes, Mom, Erica said flatly. Megan threw a pointed look over her shoulder as she disappeared down the hall. Alone, Erica sank deeper into the couch cushions. Is it really come down to this? Banking on her appearance instead of her abilities? She didn't even consider herself particularly striking. Approachable, maybe, with her auburn hair shaved close on one side and longer on the other. Edgy for an office, though she could tame it when needed. She was compact and athletic, the kind of person whose presence filled a room in spite of her height. She knew how to carry herself. But a man like Brock Gordon? He wouldn't be swayed by anything short of actual fame. Still, she'd heard of him now that she thought about it. A self-made billionaire still in his 30s, the kind of mind that came along once a generation, the next Bill Gates, people said, only sharper. Looks wouldn't get her through his door. She'd need her credentials to do the heavy lifting. But what did she have to lose by trying? And if some initial impression got her foot in the door, she could always let her brain take over from there. Chapter 2. All I want to know is why it's taking this long. Who wouldn't jump at the chance to work here? Or for me, for that matter. Brock muttered, mostly to himself. The listing had only been up for 3 days, yet the volume of applicants was already underwhelming him. We're doing what we can, Angie said, not bothering to soften her tone. It's not like no one's applied. You're just impossibly selective. She made no effort to hide her exasperation. But then, no one around him did. He cultivated that kind of candor deliberately. There should be more, he grumbled. I stand by my right to be choosy about who I trust with this company. Your next applicant is due in an hour, she called after him as he retreated toward his office. Resumes on your desk along with her references. Call her. See if she can come in sooner. He didn't wait for a response. At his desk, he picked up the single-page resume waiting for him. Erica Samson. Young, freshly graduated, but her internship history told a different story. Recognizable names, well-regarded contacts who'd apparently put their reputations behind her work ethic. She'd finished with honors, too. Whether she'd be overqualified or underqualified for what he needed was genuinely hard to read with someone so newly out of school. What he needed was someone who could handle being thrown into the deep end, and equally important, someone who could handle him. His temper moved fast and his patience ran shallow. That wasn't going to change. Patience hadn't made him a billionaire. She's here, came Angie's voice through the intercom. Brock glanced up, startled. You said an hour. And you said get her here sooner. She was a block away. A beat. Should I turn her around? Don't be absurd. Send her in. A moment passed, the door opened, and the most arresting woman Brock had laid eyes on in some time walked into his office. He stood there for a beat too long, thoroughly caught off guard. She was petite, with striking red hair styled in a way that somehow managed to project both sharpness and warmth simultaneously. Her figure was undeniable in a fitted charcoal suit that did nothing to understate it, and when her eyes met his, clear, searching, unmistakably intelligent, he realized he was staring. He pulled himself together. Miss Samson, please, Come in and sit down. Thank you, she said, and there was none of the nervous energy he'd seen in the other candidates. Her stride was deliberate, her handshake firm and unhesitating. When their hands met, Brock felt a distinct jolt of heat and worked to keep his expression neutral. Confidence and beauty. Now, if the professional abilities matched. On impulse, he decided not to introduce himself by name. He already knew he liked her, and he didn't want the weight of who he was making her stiffen up. Better to see who she really was first. He launched straight into the interview. Your resume is genuinely impressive, he began. She smiled, pleased, but not smug. But I have to ask up front. Given the caliber of experience you've had, why pursue an administrative position? He threw it deliberately. It was the sharpest question he had, and he'd learned to trust instinct over interrogation with most people. He had already formed an opinion of her. He liked what he saw, in more ways than he was ready to examine. Honestly, those firms aren't hiring, she said simply. I could keep doing unpaid work now that I have the degree, but that rather defeats the purpose of the degree and the debt that came with it. He nodded. Fair. And the secretarial work itself? Does it feel like a step backward? She winced slightly. I'll be honest. I'm not entirely sure I belong here. I don't know anything about Bitcoin. They didn't cover it in school. Between this and a burger job, though, she gave a small shrug. No offense meant. Brock smiled genuinely. Her candor was refreshing. He kept a mental tally. She was checking off boxes he hadn't listed on any job posting. If we bring you on, there'll be room for accounting work too. It's a full-time role, and reliability isn't optional. I don't tolerate tardiness. I arrived an hour early today, she replied, the faintest trace of a smile at the corner of her mouth. Oh yes, he liked her far more than was probably advisable. No need to be coy about it, Miss Samson. I recognize quality when I'm looking at it. Any questions for me before we go further? Just one. How long before I'd hear back? I've been living on my friend's sofa for a few months, and I think she's starting to consider my pillow as a potential murder weapon. Brock laughed. A real one. The job is yours, if you want it. She blinked. Really? And since I'd prefer my new assistant to survive the week, he added, I'll advance you the first half of your paycheck now. Her expression moved through disbelief, then relief, then something close to overwhelmed gratitude. I thank you. I've never had an employer do that. Don't you need Mr. Gordon to sign off on something like this? Brock's grin widened. I know Mr. Gordon very well. Trust me, he'll approve. He walked her toward the door, resisting the very specific temptation to rest a hand at the small of her back. Angie, can you get Miss Samson set up with the paperwork? He turned back to Erica. You start tomorrow morning. Absolutely. She lit up with a smile so warm it was almost difficult to look away from. Only the pending call waiting on his desk pulled him back to his office. Otherwise, he might have lingered in that hallway, under Angie's knowing gaze, trading smiles with his new assistant, for considerably longer than was professional. Chapter 3. Oh, for the love of... Erica's breath came in sharp bursts as she sprinted through the lobby doors, already calculating how badly she'd failed herself. And I actually lectured him about punctuality. She bypassed the elevator entirely and took the stairs, all 11 flights, arriving at the reception desk flushed, winded, and deeply embarrassed, to find Angie watching her with an expression that could strip paint. Glad you could join us, Angie said without warmth. I'm sorry. I gave myself a full hour, but there was an accident. You should have left earlier. Angie's tone left no room for negotiation. Don't let it happen again. Mr. Gordon doesn't take lateness lightly, and he extended you a financial courtesy on your very first day. That kind of trust goes both ways, Erica. The flush on Erica's face deepened, impressive, given how red the stairs had already made her. Angie wasn't finished. His personal assistant is expected to be at her desk before he arrives. Every day, without exception. That cut through the embarrassment. Personal assistant? The listing said secretary. Did he say that? Angie nodded toward the far end of the floor. Leave your things over there. 5 minutes. Then you're back here ready to work. Erica bit back her protest. Whatever title she'd been told, what mattered now was surviving the day. But her mind kept circling back to the man from the interview, the one she'd spent 3 weeks trying not to think about more than was strictly professional. Tall, dark-eyed, with the kind of easy confidence that filled a room without demanding it. She'd done her level best to keep things appropriate, which had required more effort than she would ever admit. She stashed her bag at the assigned desk and steadied her breathing. If she was being truly honest with herself, the entire operation still confused her. The evening before, someone from the company had called to walk her through the basics of digital banking. She'd spent the call nodding and saying, "Of course," while understanding approximately none of it. At least during the interview, she'd been upfront about her ignorance. She returned to the front, and the morning proceeded to be an unrelenting exercise in being corrected. Phone calls, filing, paperwork. Angie found fault with all of it, methodically, and without any visible satisfaction in doing so. "If you can't take the heat," she said more than once, "you know where the door is." By early afternoon, Erica was entertaining thoughts she rarely allowed herself, namely quitting. 2 things kept her in her chair: her pride and the advance sitting in her bank account. "How's it going out here?" Both women looked up. Erica felt her composure do something inconvenient, because leaning against the front desk was the man from her interview. Easy smile, broad shoulders, and the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to announce himself. "Fine," was Angie's contribution. "I wasn't told I'd be a personal assistant," Erica said, choosing directness. The posting said secretary. He lifted one shoulder in a casual shrug. "The interview went well enough that we bumped the role and the pay." That gave her a pause. "Well, the day hasn't exactly gone smoothly," she admitted. "At all. First days rarely do," he said, glancing at Angie with an expression that carried something unspoken. "She's being too hard on herself." "Absolutely," Angie agreed, suddenly agreeable in a way that made Erica's head spin. "Don't worry, Mr. Gordon. She'll be ready for whatever you throw at her." She offered Erica a small, almost encouraging smile. Erica's mouth opened, then closed. "Mr. Gordon." The man standing in front of her, easy, warm, utterly unintimidating in his rolled sleeves, was Brock Gordon, billionaire, industry legend, her boss. "You could have mentioned that," she managed, her cheeks blazing. "I didn't want to rattle you," he said cheerfully. "You were clearly rattled enough already." She opened her mouth again, found nothing useful, and closed it. "Give yourself time to find your footing," he said. Then the warmth dropped half a degree. But the lateness, not again. A single smile softened the edge of it, and then he was gone, heading back toward his office. Both women watched him go. Erica looked over at Angie, who had already returned her attention to the desk. She decided not to say anything. None of it made complete sense yet. She didn't fully understand why he'd hired someone as green as she was, or why he'd withheld who he was, or why the role had silently expanded. But standing there in the quiet that followed, Erica made a decision. She was Brock Gordon's personal assistant. Whatever that meant, whatever it demanded, she was going to be the best one he'd ever had. Chapter 4. Brock was flat on his back, staring at the ceiling in the dark, completely and irritatingly awake. Friday night, which meant he wouldn't see Erica again until Monday. A fact he found more bothersome than it had any right to be. She'd been with the company just under 3 weeks. By his own assessment, he'd behaved impeccably around her, which had cost him more effort than he'd exerted in a long time. He was not, by any honest accounting, a man who held back. He worked without restraint, played without apology, and had always been straightforward about the limits of what he was offering any woman who caught his eye. No false promises, no manufactured emotions, just honesty and a mutual understanding. But Erica occupied a different space in his head entirely. It was impossible to explain and harder to ignore. Every outfit she wore in that office pushed his composure in ways that had nothing to do with any deliberate intent on her part. A glimpse of neckline as she leaned across his desk, the clean line of her silhouette in well-cut trousers. More than once he'd caught himself imagining pulling her close, seeing whether that poise of hers would hold or soften under his hands, listening for the shift in her breathing if it did. He knew better. Beyond the professional and reputational dimensions of it, there was something about Erica specifically that gave him pause. The bold confidence she'd carried into his office had gradually, in his presence, given way to something more guarded: flushed cheeks, halting sentences, the visible effort it cost her to hold her composure when he was nearby. He noticed all of it. His instincts thrived on exactly that kind of dynamic, and yet, there was also something underneath it that felt genuinely unguarded. Something that hadn't been reached yet. He didn't know what to do with that. His general approach to attraction had always remained firmly outside office walls, with one lapse he hadn't forgiven himself for. And yet here he was, 3 weeks into having her 15 feet from his office door, losing sleep over it. He sat up, swinging his legs off the bed, dragging a hand through his hair. He wasn't lying to himself anymore. This wasn't a general restlessness. There was one specific face behind it, and she would be back at her desk in approximately 60 hours. His phone was on the nightstand. They'd exchanged numbers, practical necessity, given her role. He'd kept strictly to business hours, which was more than he could say for his current state of mind. The whiskey he'd had wasn't helping his discipline either. He set the phone down, picked it up again 40 minutes later, and before he'd fully talked himself out of it, typed and sent, "Great work this week. I really appreciate it." He stared at it after sending. 1 in the morning, completely transparent. She'd know immediately he'd been drinking. His phone buzzed. He grabbed it. "Not Erica. Angie. I still think about you sometimes. I'm sure you've moved on, but I want you to know what we had mattered to me. It always will." Brock let out a long, quiet groan and set the phone face down on the mattress. The regret was familiar. It surfaced every time Angie sent something like this. About a year earlier, despite a rule he'd held for good reason, he'd let things slip with her. She was striking, and he'd blamed his own weakness for it. He'd told her plainly what it was, and wasn't, before it went any further. She'd stayed on at the company anyway, and he'd sometimes wondered if proximity was her strategy, or if she simply liked the work that much. Either way, he wished she would let it rest. It wasn't going anywhere. He'd said so clearly, and he meant it. He lay back down, phone turned over, ceiling unchanged. Monday felt further away than it had any reason to.